Hello, and welcome to our podcast, Climate and
Peace.
My name's Edwin,
My name's Oakley.
and today we will be talking about a multitude of points. One local to our area, one national to Canada, and one global. First, we will focus on the local point of Canada BC's forests, and the new policies they are implementing with the help of the First Nations people to better protect old growth forests using local Indigenous knowledge.
This is a huge step for BC's government in representing Indigenous lands and peoples. BC and the Institute of Great BC's First Nations Justice Strategy have established an Indigenous Justice Secretariat that will advise the Treasury and allocate funds to policy recommendations affecting Indigenous peoples.
The government announced it would be implementing alternatives to clear-cut logging, such as selective harvesting techniques, and will be repealing outdated wording in law that prioritizes timber supply over issues like water quality and wildlife habitat. Amazing! Our beavers will be so happy!
Oh yes, they will. Next up, we'll need to talk about the Canadian government and how it is handling our forest carbon bomb and what it even is.
The wildfires in Canada this year have released over 1.5 billion tons of CO2, which is 3 times the amount of fossil fuels released in Canada. These numbers are not represented by our government and are only reported about 2/3 of our forests. An outstanding amount of disrespect to the tree huggers, eh?
Yeah, it is. Speaking of our forests, here's a quote from our Environment Commissioner on our government institutions being unaccountable and misleading. They say that, quote, our government did not provide a full and transparent picture of how Canada's forests remove carbon from the atmosphere or contribute to it, unquote.
In 1990 and onwards, Canada's forests absorbed more carbon than outputted. In 2001 was the tipping point, and Canada's forest wildfires combined with logging emissions started increasing at an exponential rate.
Natural Resources Canada and Environment and Climate Change Canada are frequently changing their numbers and calculations on emissions, land use change, and forestry. They are failing to oversee emission projects and are bending their knee for the forestry industry.
Our current forestry emissions of 3,700 megatons of CO2 are just the start. Our forests have over 100,000 million megatons of CO2 still in them, waiting to be burned and harvested. But that doesn't include the emissions from the logging industry. We should probably harvest the machines instead of the trees. Imagine how many catalytic converters are in those. Probably, maybe.
Well, we're running out of time here, so let's get to our global point of Shein. We'll talk about how Shein, the popular global fashion brand you all love, pollutes the world and abuses their workers.
Hilarious. By making 1.2 million new products every year, Shein actually produces 6.3 million tons of carbon dioxide a year, a number that falls well below the UN's target to reduce global carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. And honestly, that was never going to happen by 2030.
So true. 83% of Shein suppliers either make workers work up to 75-hour shifts with little breaks and time off, or have little to no emergency plans. Shein also has informal packaging factories set up in residential buildings in China and Europe.
In total, the fashion industry is responsible for over 10% of global carbon emissions. Think about how crazy that is, that your shirt can help contribute that much of the world's carbon emissions? Holy shirt!
12% of Shein suppliers also use underage workers, forced labor, or severe health and safety violations to reduce those Shein products. Shein also produced unsafe children's clothing as well as many offensive items and symbols.
The offensive items were definitely on purpose. But we hope you were traumatized by these statistics in a way that you can understand that our government and MPs hold all the power to reduce the biggest contributors of carbon emissions in our country, but instead tax us on gas and other emission prevention strategies. Not that it matters in any way, shape, or form. The only thing you could really do is become a nudist tree hugger who uses no electricity or anything of the like and live purely off the land.
Besides that, you can also ingrain into your children's brains the date of our next podcast episode, which is next century, and expose them to the horrors of politics and Edwin's horrible jokes. Have a terrible millennia.
This world is only going downhill from here, and it's a goddamn sphere.